I am feeling alive. Earlier this morning, I was having some weird eye glitch thing. I was just like twitching. I'm like, what's going on here? But I'm feeling good. I'm excited to chat with you about all things messy and lean into that and go where we need to go.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Eye glitch.
Yeah, it was it was weird. I was trying to do like some like eyeliner, not eyeliner, mascara, and I'm like, why? It's like it was weird. It had like a little like kind of ethereal, sparkly thing in the corner of my eye. I'm like, what is this? So I put some eye drops in. I'm like, well, we're gonna roll with it today.
I guess for the video, your eye glitch might be apparent. It's not, but
Yeah, no,
or at
I'm
least you
like,
don't need your eyes to
yeah,
talk
yeah.
about the mess
I'm
today.
like, am I starting to see spirits now too? I'm like, what is this? What's happening? We are on the winter solstice, so I'm like,
Is today the first day of the winter solstice?
it's the 21st, so I
Yeah,
think
today's the 21st.
yeah,
I had to
it's
look down at my
officially
calendar at the
winter.
bottom of my computer screen to be like, what day is it? Where are we at?
Yeah, you get a pass.
Well, I'm so excited to talk with you today. I've met you in person. We've chatted a
Hmm.
little bit. I don't know a ton about you.
Same.
I know I feel drawn and connected to you and was really excited. I know we wanted to record last weekend and we had to move some things around, and here we are.
Making it work.
But we were messaging in our NABA community about messy and
Yeah,
being messy and embracing the
yeah.
mess.
Ah,
And
I
I
was
think
gonna want to
both
make a
of us,
sound.
without TMI, but I don't really care. We're both in the season of our cycle of which it can feel a little bit messier. And so we both showed up anyways, and we were like, yep, we're synced up and
We
let's
are.
press record and let's use it for both of our podcasts. So then we don't have to record twice, and go team.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
And I'm totally going to lean into that. There's some like ancient wisdom for women that when they're on their cycle, that I feel like I get more maybe like downloads or intuitive or inspirational like ideas. I do crave more rest during that time, but I am like
Mm-hmm.
totally wanted to honor our commitment and do this too. So I think there's like definitely something sacred and like for me, like speaking of being messy, it's one of the things of being messy and just honoring that. And like if for a long time I had to even shift my relationship around that because I think there was like there's some shame or I remember feeling embarrassed like if when my mom told my grandma and stuff that even when I got my period. And so it's like I really coming to honor and like treat that as sacred and like honor the cycles of being a woman versus like it being something to be afraid of or shamed, or if my emotions are heightened, I know I get more, even it seems more sensitive around the certain times like luteal and then
Mm-hmm.
the actual bleed too. I don't know if you feel that way, different
Yeah,
your
I think
emotions.
for a long time, I didn't embrace the different phases of our cycle and the different seasons that we
Mm,
as women experience throughout a monthly cycle. And my background is in fitness, and that
mm,
was like my last lifetime of career and what I leaned into, and was a big chunk of my life. And I remember feeling, like you said, the guilt and the shame or the frustration around
mm-hmm,
being tired and being a little bit more in need of rest and maybe stretching and chilling. And I always felt like, oh, you just got to keep going. And
mm-hmm.
I remember I didn't think we were going to start it on this topic, but I
Me
love it.
either.
But I remember when I was personal training, uh, yeah, a long time ago, over 10 years ago. And I had this one client who would often cancel her sessions when she was on her period.
Mm,
And now I'm like, get it, sister. Then in my head, the story was like, okay, what do you mean you're on your period? Like this was our commitment. Do your workout, just
mm-hmm,
work through it, take some Advil and let's go.
mm-hmm.
And now it's definitely not that way. Like if I need more time for rest, I track my cycle. I use the Flow app, so I'm always checking it every day, logging my symptoms and just noticing where I'm at, even proactively. Like those few
Mm-hmm.
days leading up to my cycle and the first couple of days, like that 5 to 7 day window is
Mm-hmm.
just like pump the brakes time a little bit in a
Yeah.
lot of ways, feels better.
Totally. I've leaned into like what workouts during different time periods of my cycle. Like if I'm in, if I'm in ovulation or if I'm in like one of the other before luteal, I'm like, okay, I'm into hit and I'm into like more energy. But once it starts to get later, I'm like, okay, I want a little more yoga. I want a little more walking outside or just like some rest or nature. And then sometimes I just want like freaking horizontal time and just rest and journal in a book. But same for you, like, and I feel like in our culture too, there's just like so much like go, 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 do, do, do. Your worth is around your productivity. And that's really something that, it's served me in so many different time periods in my life of like getting things done and accomplishments. But at the same time, like kind of distancing myself from that and being and leaning into I'm worthy whether I do XYZ or not.
Mm.
And so just kind of, it's like I'm having this shift and like I honor and I'm grateful for the time periods in my life where it was like, okay, I needed to do these things to feel loved, to feel accepted, to get, attention from my parents or whatever it was, or be, a good human or an achieving adult in the world. But now it's like, no, actually I'm worthy without it. I still have like lots of dreams and things I want to get done, but how can I do this in a way that like honors the truth of my present moment and my body takes care of it and that sort of thing too.
And beyond exercise as well, as a woman in leadership and having multiple businesses, I know that
Mm-hmm.
you're holding the fort down too.
Mm-hmm.
Learning the different phases of our cycle and when it feels good to be creative, when it feels good to be
Mm-hmm.
more line it up, knock it down, get shit done, when
Mm-hmm.
you're in that phase where like I don't want to say not the debate's not the word that I'm thinking of, being more, in that follicular phase, ovulation,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, okay, those are when I want to have the tough conversations and when it makes
Mm-hmm.
sense to be more in that, let's say, yeah, masculine energy of
Mm-hmm.
talking about, the tough things, money, all that kind of stuff
Mm-hmm.
versus, later on in my cycle where it might be a little bit more, which I love. But I always wondered, like, why can't I do this sometimes, but not? And as I've leaned into
Mm-hmm.
more of the different phases of my cycle, I'm starting to learn when to schedule certain things and when not. And I also have a lot of women on my team. So
Mm-hmm.
honoring them and being like, hey, I know that we're going to be like doing this wave together. So if you need something or if it's a hard day, like, feel free to communicate that with me. It's not too much
Mm-hmm.
information. It's good if you're having a moment of being tired or low energy, and then there'll be times where I'm sure you feel this too, where we feel more productive and it's like a
For
day
sure.
is like getting shit done.
Yeah.
That feels so good.
For sure. And like now in this phase of like the next, 3 to 7 days, it's I very much lean into, okay, what intuitive insights are coming in or like what could I like create? There's a lot of creativity in that space too. I've been playing with like laying in the fertile void. And like because towards the end of the year, it comes up that I feel a little bit more burnout. I'm like, how can I nourish myself? And get ready for the year, but also honor like the season too, and lean into and like sitting in the fertile void because I love Abraham Hicks, and I think you do too. I think I've
Mm-hmm.
heard some places where you listen to things in the morning, and some of the things that I listened to recently was like doing nothing is doing something, and that is getting in receptive mode to help bring in some of the things that are already in your vortex. And I'm like, I needed to hear that. I just needed to sit and journal or just like lay there and not do anything until something comes up and like inspires me.
Yeah, like not looking in our outer world, but going
Mm-hmm.
within. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
listen to Abraham Hicks pretty much every morning when I wake up. She has like
Mm.
these little under 15-minute cartoony videos that are on
Yeah.
YouTube, and I put that on whichever one YouTube's algorithm decides to pop up, right? Because I listen to her so much, there's always one that's there and I'm like, that's the one. That's the one I need to listen to. But yeah, growing up with the conditioning of more is more and doing is better.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being in college, going to school full time, working 7 days a week,
Mm.
and telling my grandpa, aren't you so proud of me? I work 7 days a week and I'm going to school full time. I wasn't like a straight A college student, but A's and B's, was doing really well, and I
Mm-hmm.
remember like holding that as a trophy and
Mm-hmm.
being, like But it was interesting because I have a group chat with my family and my niece and my brother and my niece's mom. And we always are just, it's pretty much just all about my niece, pictures, what she's up to, updates from school, just all the things. And she said something where she was like, yeah, mom, I don't want to go to that today. It was like a Christmas parade. I just need
Mm.
to stay home and rest. I just want to rest. And I was like, yes, I love
Yes, please.
that. And I like wrote in the chat, I was like, yes, I love that she knows what she wants and needs. Like, I love that,
Mm.
in her generation where she's at in our
Mhm.
family line, that's available to her. Cause for us, it wasn't. It was just like, let's go, line it up, knock it down,
Yeah.
wake up Saturday, do your chores, get things done. Like, don't be lazy, like, get to
Mhm.
work. And I just love that she knows that at the wise age of 6 years old. I'm
That
just
is
like,
incredible.
I love it.
Like what a good like role model role model and just like to have her understanding of what she needs and wants to thrive at that age. It kind of reminds me of a story that came up for me recently. And interesting enough, so like yesterday was it would have been my dad's 71st birthday. And he died in 2013. And there's been a lot of like interesting experiences, like whether it was with plant medicine, psychedelics, with ketamine therapy. There's a lot of different things. But I will say, you mentioned NABA, like I'm doing a course in there, and
Which
I
one?
say it's going to be doing about writing and writing a chapter of your
You're
life.
making a course. I thought you meant you
Yeah.
were doing one. Okay. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Cool.
No. And so, anyways, it's like basically what I'm saying is like I had always kind of similar to you. I felt like if I get that A's on a roll, then my dad loves and accept me. I got money. It was like a bonus or something like that. And so I point up this little sheet, this little I gotta just show you because it's like so special for me. But it's a special like little group that of questions that my dad did, and I'm telling you that stories basically have the power to incredible impact and I can't think of the word right now. Cover time. Like, okay, basically he gave me this freaking I can't think right now. I'm having like such a big heart and brown brain fire
Brain fart.
right now. Jesus. I'm like, wow. Talk about some like brain farts. Okay. So anyway, I like my whole entire life thought that I had to act in like this. And so I found that like I was like shopping and or like perusing through this like book.
And the book says, for those of you listening,
Yes,
Lynn's holding up
basically,
a book. It says My
yeah.
Dad,
Yeah,
right?
it says like my dad, his stories, his words. And I had always wanted his story to know more about him. He was like very reserved, but he gave me this and it was one of the best gifts that I've ever owned. It's probably like one of my most private and prized possessions. Like what the hell is going on with me? My eye and now my
The eye
talking about
glitch, the word
talking
glitch,
about talking about messy. I feel messy right now. Okay,
messy and doing
fantastic.
it
I'm
anyway
here.
because you
I'm here and
can.
I'm doing it anyway. I love you, Dad. Anyway, okay, so basically it talks about like asking him one of the best things in his life that he was like the most proud of his life. And he basically said that it was the day that you were born, that you and your dad or you and your brother were born. And I take that as like, wow, like my whole life I was working for him to be proud of me, but it was something that I didn't have to earn. And so like this little book was so healing and like it just showed how stories can transcend time basically, because like
Mhm.
I didn't have that reaction when I first read this, like however many years ago, like 11 years ago. But today, or like a month or two ago, I was like bawling when I read it. I was like, it was such a big epiphany, just like I didn't have to earn it versus like what I thought, before. And I was like, oh wow, that's a good way for me to move forward.
Yeah, you existing
Yeah.
was the proudest moment. Like you being here was all the enough-ness
Yeah.
that could ever been needed. Did he make this book for you leading to the end of his life? Did
Mhm.
he already make it? Like, I don't know all
Mhm.
of that story. Feel free to share
Yeah.
whatever you want.
Yeah. No, I think it's beautiful because I gave him the book because I'm like, you're going to tell me one way or another. I'm like, I'm going to find out these stories, some of your life, what's going on, because he was like way more reserved. And so I gave him this book, and then like he took about 6 months, and then he gave it to me for my birthday in like 2012. And then, the less than a year later, he died. But it was just so like pivotal to have that and like to have like this healing little book that I've read so many times. And to be honest, like, I was ready to read it, but I made it as a Christmas present one year for my brother. But he still hasn't read the whole entire thing yet. And it's just like more sensitive. And, whenever he's ready to go through that and read it and feel those feelings and emotions that can feel so messy that I have completely numbed for so long in my life. When he will be ready when he's ready, and that's something that I've had to learn, is that I can't force someone to be ready, or to feel a certain way or that sort of thing. It's like all in their own like certain timeline.
Yeah, there's the timing and what you're ready for. There's the
Yeah.
timing and what others are ready for. And either way, the story is there, right? Like you said,
Hmm.
one way or another, I'm going to get it out of you, Dad, or you're going to tell me those things. And maybe he
Yeah.
didn't have the words or the
Hmm.
availability of having the dialogue and conversation wasn't how that story was supposed to come out. It was supposed
Hmm.
to be, like you said, it took him 6 months to write through it, and you've decided to go through it. Maybe your brother not yet, but
Hmm.
that's so beautiful. And I've been getting like the targeted ads on Instagram,
Mm.
for the my
Mm.
mom's store. Mom, it's called Mom Tell Me Your Story
Yes.
and Dad Tell Me Your Story. And I think those are so cool. Um, because we learn so much about ourselves now when we learn the stories of
Hmm.
those before us, like all of our ancestors, whether it's our
For
parents,
sure.
grandparents, great grandparents, and we get to see maybe where our mess, or like I like to call it, masterpiece,
Yes.
uh, came from, or like were there anything that you learned from your dad's story that helped you like unpack or untighten some of the knots that were in your life?
Maybe not necessarily from the book. Definitely from learning about my grandfather, though. He died very early. I never met him in person. He kind of had a violent death. My dad was only 14 whenever he died. But I chatted with my grandmother. My grandmother's still alive, and I feel so lucky and blessed that she's 94, still with it, like still drives, like, is open to sharing these different aspects. And there's a big piece, I for a long time, like I have a little witchiness in me, and for a long time I didn't want to own it or take ownership because I didn't want people to think I was crazy. And really, for me, that felt like I'm intuitive. I can read situations good. Maybe that's a combination of trauma. Maybe that's a combination of hyper independence or whatever. But anyway, um, I learned that he had actually gone to like different psychological facilities for what I don't know exactly what his diagnosis was, but I think that he could feel and had a deep sensitivity, or felt strong emotions in certain ways. And back then, like they didn't really know how to handle it, or what the best treatment option was. So I know he did like some what is it, shock treatment therapy. And so I'm like, luckily I don't have to do that today. But like it just kind of showed me that he was like also very emotional. And maybe he didn't handle it in all the appropriate ways, or like healthy conscious conversations or stuff like that, or didn't know how to recognize or feel the emotions or get permission or that sort of thing. But I definitely resonate with him feeling super emotional. And I kind of definitely believe that one of my greatest superpowers is sensitivity, but it can also be one of the biggest challenging things to do, is like feeling so deeply. It's something that I numbed for a long time. It's definitely part of the piece or element that I resonate with, feeling messy sometimes. And that's what I've leaned into a little bit recently, is that I can show up messy, or when I feel emotional, I can demonstrate and have like tears online, and like that's okay. And in fact, I feel like it gives permission for other people to be emotion. There was a call also that Austin, I think, mentioned on a NABA call, which I love the community, and I'm so grateful that like we met through this
Same.
community. Like it's so cool. But
Same. If all that came out of
yeah.
it was that I met the people that I have met, like if all of it disappeared tomorrow, not that it will, it's going to the
Yeah.
moon, but like that is the best part, the people I've met
Yeah.
and us embracing that mess together.
For sure. And like he mentioned, you know, that the achievements and all that stuff help inspire people, like whether it's, you know, creating this business or coaching or having a podcast or, you know, an inspiring something or another, a book, whatever it is. But it's like, so the mess or the humanness that actually like creates the relatability. And
Mhm.
that is just so beautiful, like meeting people on like, the, you know, connectivity levels and that we're all in this together versus like kind of like a pedestal or something similar like that. And so I
Mhm.
just love that perspective too.
Yeah. Yeah, the humanness, which
Mm-hmm.
is the full spectrum of emotions and feels and highs and
Mm-hmm.
lows or whatever you want to call it. And I feel like, and I know we're kind of both in that season
Mm-hmm.
of unapologetically expressing the mess and metabolizing the mess within our
Mm-hmm.
spiritual well-being and stuff. And there's an element of safety that I believe
Mm-hmm.
needs to be there. Yeah, I just got full body goosebumps when I
Mm-hmm.
said that. That needs to be there in order to express the mess, because
Mm-hmm.
I moved to Utah a year and a half ago. Before that, I was back in California because COVID happened. Before that, I was in Austria, stuck in my
Wow.
apartment, couldn't leave, just like, and then before that was working in a position where there was no time for feels. I was in a different country every single week. I was the face of the company. I remember
Mm-hmm.
having a conversation with my friend Sylvia. She was on TV a lot too. So was I. That we couldn't cry because if we cried the next day, our eyes would be puffy and then you got to go on TV. Like we didn't know. And I need to talk with her about this again because we talked about it, about how it's like, yeah, there's emotions there to express, but as soon as we unleash the sprinklers, what do you do when it's action time, And I was on camera every single day for 7 years, like
Wow.
every single day. And so, anyways, now recently being in Utah for over a year, feeling so safe physically,
Mm.
emotionally, financially, spiritually, right? And then I've been doing Dr. Erin Pollinger's Manifesting Magic course that she did.
Mm.
And I laugh because I told her, I'm like, Erin, that shit's like Jumanji. Like you cannot not finish it. So, anyways, in this course, you're working with the womb space and the
Mm-hmm.
feminine and expressing all parts of that, right? We think feminine energy is like loving and nurturing and kind. It is, but there's also rage and
Yeah.
there's warrior spirit in that. And there is lioness energy,
Mm-hmm.
And so over the last month or so, especially after finishing the push catch detox, I was talking with Austin and I was like, I'm not sure if I feel good. Like I
Mm-hmm.
just unleashed a lot, but now I'm realizing like, oh, that's because for the first time in a long time, you feel safe. You
Mm.
have the time to land and I love that spirit about me of being go, go, go and being determined. And
Mm-hmm.
I am relentless and tenacious. I'll identify with
Mm-hmm.
those words, but I've also been empowered to pump the brakes a little bit too. And when we're in that place of safety, I feel like that's where the masterpiece loves to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been wild.
I love that. And I love that, you know, the safe that you have like pinpointed the safety element too. Have there been any like messy or, you know, rageful practices that help you kind of unleash it since that safety is there?
Yeah, expressing it,
Mm-hmm.
like crying hysterically, screaming,
Mm-hmm.
crawling on the ground,
Yes.
moving in a
I love
very,
yes.
like whatever. Fly on the wall would know what's going on in here. No, whatever. I'm not filming myself and posting that on social
No,
media.
you don't
That's a
have to.
sacred
It's
place
for
for me.
you.
But
Yeah.
or like there's been times where, after a long day of leading my team, I come in and I just collapse to the ground
Mm.
and sob and mourn and moan. And it's like there's a part of me, like you said, that I had numbed for so long. And I also think too, it was unconscious, you know, like it was like that door was shut and locked, but I didn't even know where that door was. Then,
Mm-hmm.
you know, then you start to know where that door is, and then you're kind of avoiding it or opening it just a little bit and peeking in real quick and then shutting the door. But now I just feel like, yeah, that needs to come up. That
Mm-hmm.
needs to be expressed. And I can't remember who it was, a friend of mine. Anyways, was sad. And I had mentioned to my mom, you know, like, oh yeah, I'm going to go spend time with this friend because they're sad. And she was like, why are they sad? And I was like, because they're sad. Like, I don't know. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't ask why they were sad. Sadness sometimes has to come up, and I'm going to go hold space for
Mm-hmm.
that person while they're sad. I don't, you know, it didn't occur to me. Just like asking people what they do doesn't really occur to me. Like, it just to me is very
Mm-hmm.
surface, you know, but I
Same.
realize, and it's nobody's fault or it's not my mom's fault, whatever, but it's like, we never ask like or have concern when someone's happy or joyful or all good and everything's fine. But why does it have to be something's wrong or
Mm-hmm.
seen as like a bad thing that you're sad or
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable or something's going on? I didn't even think to ask the person, oh, you're sad? Cool, I'll be there. What do you need? You want to talk about it? You want a hug? Do you just want to be sad? You know?
Yeah.
But now I'm really seeing the place that all the emotions have to take.
I think that's so important. I love that you're doing it for yourself too. It's like you don't have to like, I mean, there's some people I know that do record like the rage rituals or something. And to me it's like, if it's being curious where that's coming from, or for them. Like, but I also love that you're keeping it sacred and honoring that for yourself. I did something recently. I'm part of like this pleasure priestess group, and she had a guest teacher come in and we did a rage ritual. And so one of the things is like a song of rage where we're like, screaming either into a pillow or like, humping a pillow or bashing a pillow, into the bed or whatever it is, or like punching or all these things, the air, or like all those things. And then it was a song of grief. And like really allow us to feel that as well. And then it was like, and then we tapped into like a sensuality. So there was like a song of like sensual. So like moving from that, I'm like, wow, it was very empowering. But I just think that there's so much also conditioning around, or especially about being a woman, right? Being a good girl or things like that. And like for me, I know for part of my journey recently, I had defaulted like to being, or being some of that more good girl, because I knew that was accepted, loved, and all those things. And so it actually produced a lot of anxiety. So much so anxiety, thought patterns that didn't feel like me, so much where I was like, pulling into my garage and like having like super like suicidal ideation type of thoughts. I'm like, what is this? This is not like, I got to get some help. And so I, sought therapy. I sought ketamine assisted therapy, which helps like, neural pathways and all that jazz. Totally like life changing experience. And then, so one session, or after one session, or doing an integration session with my therapist, she's like, do you think that part of your anxiety could have been from repressing your wild woman? And it just like clicked. I was like, snap. Like I totally was repressing this part of me, and like how, and then that's also a part of, like, it was like, in a way I got to switch the viewpoint of like, hey, this anxiety is bad, to like, this, it's my body showing me how I can show up, or to showing, it's like pulling, like, listen to me please, I am wanting to be expressed in some way, form, or fashion. Like, you are not being your most authentic self type of thing. And so how are we going to get you to like, to be that again? Because I, fallen back into a typical pattern, like whether it was like with offerings that I was offering the world, different relationships, that sort of thing. And so, yeah, I would say like there's so much condition around being that good girl, and I'm not a good girl. I can still be kind and still be wild, or have those things. Kind of like I can be messy and kind and wild, and unapologetic, those sorts of things. But yeah, I would say, like, I know my mom has a lot of the same like conditioning of, not wanting to upset people or have certain hard conversations, or that, she'll lose love or something, or has to show up in a certain manner. And that
Yeah.
shifted because we've had conversations or opportunities to have conversations. Um, so, in some ways, like my own journey has also repaired our relationship or inspired her to have those difficult conversations.
Yeah, to see what that looks like or what that could
Hmm.
be. You get to be an example. And
Mhm.
yeah, oftentimes those emotions are there to teach us something and to tell
Mhm.
us something. But we've been taught, like you said, you got to be a good girl, which means have it all together and have a
Yeah.
smile and, calm down a little bit or calm down the
Mhm.
emotions. And
You're too much. You're not enough. You gotta be act this way. You gotta be this. There's so much.
I know. And I really feel like I'm in a season of, yeah, surrender and
Mm.
trust. Whatever's coming up, whatever that next step might be. I started meditating with Dr. Joe
Mm.
in 2018. And I did it because I knew that meditation was good for you. I didn't do it because I thought it would like get rid of these anxious feelings. I didn't really
Mm.
make that connection, right? Anyways, I used to have these really big anxiety attacks where my brain and body would just like lose it. And I'd be in bed all day and it would happen, maybe a couple times a month, whatever. And then it started to go down, like they started to go away. And I
Mhm.
remember being like, yes, like I conquered this, right? Well, lo and behold, come to safety and security in Utah a couple months ago, I had another one. And I remember
Mm.
thinking, like, what am I doing wrong that this is coming back? But I was talking to a friend of mine who talked like was on the phone with me while I was having this anxiety attack and was just like, breathe through it, like big in it. Like we were just
Mm.
like together in that, probably one of the most beautiful sacred
Mm.
experiences with that person. And then he goes, what is it trying to tell you? Talk to it. What is it trying to tell you? And it was
Mhm.
like that you don't need to do so much, that you don't need to do everything. That's not about who you are. You're London. Like you can just be and be okay. And I'm laying in my
Mm.
bed, yeah, talking to the anxiety, having the dialogue. And after that, and even right in this moment talking to you, I was like, wait, the goal was to not get rid of the anxiety. The goal is to understand it and to
Mhm.
talk to it and to
And
come
listen.
nose to
Yeah.
nose with it
Mm.
and to have that be okay and to get the
Mhm.
wisdom that you need from that because
Yeah.
you get wisdom from joyful amazing moments. You also get wisdom when things are dark and
Mhm.
scary and uncomfortable. And and that's where I'm at now is like messy is good. Like as long
Mhm.
as you're not picking up your shit and throwing it at someone else, right? Like
Yeah.
as long as you're not smearing your mess over someone else. And I think that's where the place that I'm at and what I'm excited about is like we all have a mess, but we try to blame someone. We try to be like,
Mm.
well, I'm mad. Who made me mad? I'm sad. Who
Mhm.
made me sad? But it's actually like, no, mad and sad are part of it. We have this beautiful wheel of emotions. And
Mhm.
instead of blaming something outside of us for causing it, we're not taught this though, right? Because I wish there was a class on talking to your emotions and
Mhm.
gosh, that would have been my favorite class. But being able to be like, okay, it's not about who did what to me in order for me to feel this type of way. It's like
Mhm.
this chemical concoction of this feeling and emotion is here. What is it trying to teach me? And I think one
Mhm.
time I heard it was like a pastor talking about like if you don't how did he say it like if you don't I forget how he phrased it but it's like basically like don't bleed on someone who never cut you.
Mm.
It's okay to be messy and have a wound and be bloody, but it's not somebody else's job to fix it or
Correct.
sew you up. And don't bring that mess to the next thing and bleed all over them, and I love that.
That what that reminds me of is as you're speaking is like, yeah, the moment if we're and I've totally like, you made me so mad before. And and maybe that's like me to look at the trigger, as my teacher and that sort of thing. But yeah, I feel like the moment that we do that, it's kind of like pointing the blame or it's like stepping into a victimhood mentality versus like that taking personal responsibility of how we're feeling because I feel like we can still be messy, we can honor our emotions, and we can also honor other people's boundaries. We can be respectful, we can be kind, and that sort of thing. And also, it's like, hey, if you need a little space, for me, sometimes I'm like, I just need a little distance, a little time to really like get to how I feel. I don't want to say anything, impulsively that hurts someone's feelings or that isn't like, my deepest truth of the moment. Like maybe I need to go journal something or just like sit with myself and my emotions for a second. And I can now voice that versus just like, peace, I'm gone. you know. Um And so I think that that's just kind of like the victimhood and personal responsibility, because I think there's so much power in taking ownership and personal and having that personal responsibility. But there is a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of freedom, because I believe that's how we start to co-create our lives and the lives that we want. But it is also a lot of responsibility to say that, like, okay, I am the common denominator in all of my relationships and all of my successes and all of my failures. Like when I showed up, when I didn't show up, it was the common denominator was me.
Mm.
And so, like, I learned that whenever I noticed a pattern in certain characteristics that I was dating different people. And I was like, wait a second, it's like this in a different form or this in a form, but the common denominator is me. So I got to get real with myself and ask myself questions and that sort of thing too.
Yeah, what are you attracting? And I love the word
Yeah,
responsibility. I love words in general because I love
me too.
communication and that's what I coach on. But responsibility is response ability, your ability to
Love
respond.
that.
And so, yeah, it's your responsibility, but you also have that response ability. And instead
Mm.
of reacting or, like you said, you made me mad or all the things. And even though I coach on this stuff, I make mistakes all the time, right? Like I
Mhm.
ask for do-overs, I apologize, and that's kind of where the that's kind of where the conversation with you and I started, where we were like, yeah. And even Jen Reno, who's one of our mutual friends in our NAVA community, we're talking after this for the podcast, but she called
Awesome.
me after I did that last podcast of like, oh, you can be messy and, right? Like I can be a messy, fucked up communicator, mess up, and still coach on communication and
Mhm.
still show up, right? And so
Mhm.
knowing that like you don't have to have it all together in order to bring your story, bring your gift. And
Mhm.
Brene Brown said this one time, I think in an interview I watched, is like, instead of you made me mad or you did this, she says, the story I'm telling
Yes.
myself is.
Yes.
And most recently too, in relationships and other things, it's come up where it's like the story I'm telling myself is that I'm not good enough for you and that I'm not, and getting to the roots
Mhm.
of that story is huge. And I know that's your jam. I know you're a story doula, which I would love to hear. I mean, I get the idea of it. I kind of have an idea, but this is not something that you like, go to college to get your story doula
Yeah.
degree.
No.
So like, to me, the stories are everything. It's never really
Mhm.
about what's happening. It's about the story that you're telling about what's happening. It's
Mhm.
about what you make it mean.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I want to know more about what it means
Yeah.
to be a story doula and the stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah, I know. And so there's kind of like a twofold, really, like the stories we tell ourselves. Well, okay, we are meaning making machines. And so the stories we tell ourselves, we can turn everything into a meaning that works for us instead of against us. And so I see it's like you can live the story that you want to, like you're the author of your life canvas by being very selective with the words and the language that you use. I totally believe words are spells. And that's why I don't listen to certain music. That's why I don't say certain terms. I'm like, I'm not going to be programmed with that belief, I'm very careful. So that's one aspect of it. And then the other aspect is that there's so much freedom and story ownership. And I really got to see after writing my own book how everything worked for me and how certain traumas or impacts influence certain decisions in life, whether it was sexual abuse, whether it was verbal abuse, whether it was grief or pain, loss, chaos, like all these different things. Like writing my old helped me live my new. It just like gave me different perspective, bird's eye lens. Yeah, like loved it. And then it's like interesting. And doula to me is like, someone who helps birth something into the world, whether it's a baby or something like that. To me, it's a creative project can also have some of those same characteristics, maybe less breastfeeding and less crying, maybe not less crying all the time. But I'd always loved stories and imagination. And then so when I had the epiphany that I wanted to help people birth their stories into a way, whether that's a book or you coming on my podcast or something like that, I burst into tears and started crying and had full body chills. I was like, I guess I gotta follow that feeling. And now it's also evolved into, helping people live like their authentic expression or the story they want to live. And so like story. And then once I had that epiphany in Costa Rica, I was like, nah, I was like, duh, I've always loved stories my entire life. Of course it would be stories. It was like kind of like one of these like moments. And I'd gone to school for like journalism and studied acting and writing at UCLA Extension in LA and done all kinds of stuff. So I was like, huh, took like book coaching stuff too. But yeah. And so I just really feel like the more people are aware that they have that power, that they can create a new story, then they'll feel more empowered and live a happier life. And that has like tons of
Mm-hmm.
ripple effects too. They can be living examples or walking possibilities of what's possible, for their family, for their loved ones, for their ancestors. You touched on ancestors earlier. And so I think like both, older ancestors and those to come can be inspired or like set a new pathway for
Mm-hmm.
for their families.
I love what you said about how when I chose to rewrite the old,
Mm,
I was allowed to rewrite the new, or however you said that. I'm going to have to go back and
yeah.
re-listen, but I love that. And I love the idea of birthing a story.
Mm-hmm.
Especially for women, we can get stuck in the loop thinking that the only thing we can birth is a human.
Mm,
And I've worked with clients who have had a lot of guilt and shame
mm,
and frustration around being at an age where they're can no longer have kids, and whether they
mm-hmm.
wanted them or not, there's some part of them that feels like they let themselves or even their parents down for not giving
Mm-hmm.
them grandkids, etc. I don't have kids,
Same.
and you can birth a whole lot through that creative sacral energy, including the
100%.
story about, not having kids and being able to step into your power. And so I love that idea, because we all have a story within us to be birthed. We all
Mm-hmm.
have a purpose within us to be birthed and gifted to the world. It doesn't have to be a human. And I know I have a lot of moms that listen, because a lot of the episodes with moms do super well, but I also know there's a lot of not moms that are
Mm-hmm.
listening too. And so, yeah, I want to talk a little bit about like
Yeah.
birthing your story and making that the creation that you bring to the
Yeah.
world.
Well, and in some ways, I experienced total postpartum depression after it came out, and also I tell people it was kind of like empty. It was the day my book was published. It was the day my child left the nest, and it was also the day they were born. And so it was like very interesting. And there was a big moment of like, okay, I've done this, now what? So there was like some interesting like grief too, that I'll never get to have this experience for the first time again, and so it was really interesting that there were some like what I postpartum book birthing or story birthing that came too. And I am totally an advocate of someone following their own inner directives, because the world always is telling us what to believe, what to do. And while some of it is valuable, that how we can make positive changes and impacts in our lives and in the lives of others, but sometimes a lot of it is conditioning, or how others think we should behave, like the having children thing. I think that's a big one. Like I'm 36,
Same.
about to be 30, yeah. And so I'm like, I'll be 37 next year. And so a lot of the times, especially I grew up in a small town, I've even felt that pressure before, like, when are you gonna have kids? Like my dad, I would love to see some grandkids before I go. And so I think that's big. I also am like totally an advocate for giving mothers and stay-at-home moms like the honor that they deserve, because that's got to be one of the hardest jobs in the world, is raising a quality human.
Totally. Mm.
So I'm like, yes, good on you. But we can also be so maternal in other ways, towards ourselves, towards nieces, nephews, towards projects, the stories that we want to birth in the world. I mean, I totally find like, worth and honor in that too. I'm going to switch my leg up here. Okay.
Did your leg fall asleep?
Yeah, I was like, I need to move it.
Last weekend, when we were supposed to originally record our podcast, I drove out to go make candles.
Mm,
I can say it because by the time this episode comes out, it'll be after Christmas. I went to go
good.
make a candle for my mom for Christmas.
Okay.
Homemade candle with this girl, Nicole, who's amazing. And I made one for myself. I made one for my mom. Such a beautiful experience. We were just talking, and she was like, what's your podcast going to be on? And I was like, oh, I'm talking with this
Mm,
girl, Kristen. This was before we decided to reschedule, but I was like, oh, I'm talking with this girl, Kristen. She's a story doula, and she helps people birth their stories in book form or expression or however. I mean, this was my first time asking you specifically about it, but like, I
Mm-hmm.
know a thing or two. So I was like, story do
Yeah.
like kind of get the idea. And she was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to listen to that episode. Will you send it to me when it goes live? Because I've been writing this story and
Mm.
I feel stuck.
Mm.
So I want to talk to the person that's listening, that's like
Yeah.
her, who's writing the story and feels stuck. Is there
Mm-hmm.
something to learn from the stuck? Should we expect that there's going to be the stuckness in the story birthing process?
Mm.
What would you just say to someone who's like, I have that story to get out, or I've been doing it, but now I'm at a
Mm-hmm.
spot where I'm just like, I'm not sure what the next
Yeah.
best step is.
Well, there's a few things because I think that, well, one, I'd probably have a lot of questions for her. And like, where are you at in your process? Have you ever outlined? Have you set a clear beginning and a clear end? Especially if it's a personal story, like a memoir or a reflective story, something like that. Sometimes it's memoir is not every single detail of your life. It's usually a set period of time or an arc of transformation. So if it's like this trial or something that you went through, what scenes would paint the before, like the heart of the mess or the chaos, or before you learned a lesson or before something, what's the climax of you learning it, what scenes paint that, and then to the end, what paints the resolution and who you are today. Kind of like something like that is like an easy way to describe it, from something to something else. I would also get curious, like if it's resistance per se, like is there, a fear that you're not acknowledging or that you feel stuck, or is there a certain way that you can become inspired again? Sometimes maybe even just like writing 3 different ways to open a book or to finish a book or something like that. I would say just be very curious about the resistance, because a lot of times the resistance wants us to pause or to not. And I am a huge fan of Stephen Pressfield, and he wrote a book called The War of Art. And he basically says that the more resistance that we feel to our project, the greater it is to the evolution of our soul. And so when you feel
I
that
love Steven
resistance, yeah.
Pressfield.
I'm like, when you feel that resistance and you feel it means that you're on to something good. And then you just got to keep applying the ass to the chair and like writing, even if it's like a sentence or a paragraph or something like that. I also highly recommend like getting a shitty first draft out of the way and like feeling that and celebrating that. And then going back with maybe taking as much time as you need, taking a breather, going back with fresh eyes before you start the editing process or
Mm.
recruit someone. And then, we also have a lot of AI tools. And I have some hesitations because I'm such a creative and like I feel like stories are so personal that they can definitely be used as a tool if you're stuck. Like, give me 3 different options of how to open this scene. Okay, cool. At the same time, I do feel like there's nothing that will replace, like Austin mentioned on my podcast, our unique vibratory signature and medicine that we've gained from all of our life experiences and the things that we've learned along the way. And so that can't be replaced. So you've got to actually pour that in through the page. I also find like finding my flow physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally helps me before I sit down and write. So whether that's like moving my body, whether it's dance or going for a walk or a workout, whether that's repeating certain affirmations into my mind, or even affirmations where I ask myself a question like, why do I feel so inspired? Why do I always meet the right people at the right time? Or words flow through me onto the page, or like I'm a vessel for creative awakenings, or I'm a vessel for whatever shift you want your book to have on the world. And so just like really I love like just even twofers, like sometimes a meditation will benefit my mental health, my emotional health. A walk does like my mental, my physical, my emotional. So I do that sometimes too, and recommend that to people that I work with too.
I like that.
I mean, there's so
Why
many. I
am
was
I
gonna, yeah.
full of ideas? Why do my
Yes.
ideas effortlessly just go onto the
Yeah,
page
yeah,
with ease?
yeah. Why am I
Why am I
so
such a
abundant?
gifted writer?
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like when we use that,
Yes.
certain tone of voice, and then our brains start looking for the answers to the questions that we're asking. And there's so many times where I've asked myself, like, why am I so abundant? That, it's those random things like the person buying my coffee in the line ahead of me, or, why am I so, especially why do I always meet the right people at the right time? I have met some people in some interesting ways. And so I'm like, interesting, cool. That'll be fun to see where that goes.
Yeah, I love that question. Why do I meet the
Mhm.
right people at the right time?
Mhm.
I've never asked myself that question. And I've seen that with my eyes wide open in my own life so many times where
Mhm.
it's like, I'm excited for that person that can help me with this to show up. I think that's more the language I've used
Mhm.
before rather than the question. And that's kind of that season in surrender too, where I know that there's other
Mm.
people that I know I need to collaborate with and what I want to create and what I want to do next, that I'm excited for them to show up. I'm excited to witness
Mhm.
that. I think that's the other side of the coin, if you will, of thinking you have to and do all the things and go look for the person and go. And it's like, actually, like there's been so many times where I've met someone like in a plant medicine ceremony in a teepee with 5 people, or walking down the road,
Yeah.
or just decided to get off at that gas station real quick, even though in my head I was going to go to the next one and meet
Mhm.
this person, or get off and go to this diner, even though there's a long wait. Oh, cool. There's a spot at the bar for one person. I'm going to sit right there. Who's
Mm.
next to me? Right. Like
Mhm.
so many
Totally.
cool moments like that.
Totally. I've had a wreck.
Love
A
that.
wreck brought me together with someone cool. Like,
A
yeah, there
what?
was like a wreck. Like, I was in an
A
Uber.
car wreck.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was in an Uber going to the airport one time, and they sideswiped another like black SUV, and it ended up being someone really dope. And we ended up sharing I mean, like a well-known famous comedian. We ended up being on the same flight, sharing a mimosa, and like talking about writing and just like having this really cool moment, and then getting on the flight and coming to Austin. So it was really cool. But yeah, like the sitting at the bar one, and yeah, it's not necessarily something that we have to control. It's just being open to those experiences and allowing them to flow, or like the surrender aspect that you keep
Yes.
mentioning.
And when that happens, it just makes me more excited for the
Hmm.
next person I might meet. And not so much of like, oh, what can this person do
No.
for me? Just like, what can the fact that or what can we create because our paths cross?
Hmm.
Or like,
Hmm.
now I'm thinking in my head, I need to go tell Nicole to connect with you because you guys would be the perfect connection if she's feeling stuck in her book.
Hmm.
Cool. I met her through Becca, who I've done combo with. I met
Mm.
Becca because of my neighbor. I met my neighbor because my best friend came and met my neighbor at the park, right? Like all these things where when you look back at the history of you, it's like, it's so much more divine than we're
Hmm.
conditioned to believe.
So true. And allowing space for that divinity to happen. I know I've had some control issues in the past. Even sometimes going back to mess and my dog coming into my life. I'm like, oh, he is a big spiritual initiation in releasing control. Or cleanliness, or like that kind of like OCD-ish like nature. So it's been an interesting ride. And oh yeah, just like yeah, when went to Egypt, I came back and I was following like what I say is the butterflies. Like, okay, I'm just going to see kind of what life presents and what opportunities happen. And then a friend of mine invited me to go to like a yoga sound healing place. And then that turns out that's where I met Veronica. And I was like, oh, this is nourishing. I went back a couple of weeks, and then we grabbed coffee, and then we talked about Naba and all these things. And so, which led to the in person, which led to meeting you. And I always loved your energy. So it's just like interesting, like how things unfold when we don't try to like make it look a certain way.
And one more thing I want to talk about, and then we
Hmm.
can wrap up and land the plane. I could talk to you forever.
Same.
But something I do a lot with my clients is written exposure therapy. I don't know if you've heard
Ooh,
of
I don't
that
know. I'm
before.
not familiar.
It's called WET, WET.
Hmm.
There's research on it. You could check it out. But it's what you do is you pick a specific moment in time of a story you want to rewrite.
Hmm.
And it's 5 sessions, and you write the first time what happened, the next time what happened. You just don't stop writing.
Mm.
You write the what happened, what happened, what happened. And then the last 2 sessions, you write the because, right? Like, because this happened, here's what I'm going to make it mean moving forward, right? And when
Mm.
I first started researching it and then doing it myself and working on that, I was like, oh, it's like the story is a junk drawer. And when you start writing it over and over and over and over and over again, you're taking it out, you're taking that old cord and you're putting it with the cords. You're taking the scissors that has the
Mm.
corroded lipstick connected to it and separate, like
Mm-hmm.
just organizing, right? We can't erase what happened to us. And that's not the point, right? We can't make that bad thing go away.
Mm-mm.
You talked about losing your dad, and we didn't dive a ton into that, but like sexual abuse. And I had Elisa Marie on my podcast last week, who's gone through so much stuff. And I think about my history with my family and me choosing the route that I wanted to go. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember for so long, I wanted an apology. I wanted someone to admit they were wrong. I wanted someone to take ownership for what I had experienced in my life. And then when I started working through understanding written exposure therapy and all of
Mm.
that, it was like, no, the point is not to delete that. It's to not bleed on all over everybody else. And it's
Mm.
to be like, oh, look at that scar. That's from when I did X, Y, or Z.
Mm.
And here's what I learned from it. And so I feel like written exposure therapy is so good to organize the mess, organize the file cabinets of all the
Interesting.
stories. So then,
Yeah.
it's like I can pull the story and be like, when my grandpa wanted to disown me for my decisions, let me
Mm-hmm.
tell you more about this, versus me going into relationships thinking I'm not good enough and I have to prove myself and then acting that out, right? Being able to write that. And I've worked with a lot of clients on that, from little things all the way to big things. I always tell them,
Mm-hmm.
whatever you're willing to touch, I'm willing to go there with you. So you can choose,
Beautiful.
right?
Yeah.
If it's, yeah, whatever that is. But
Well, yeah, safety. I feel like the more safe they
totally,
feel,
the
then
safety, the
you can let
rapport,
you go. Yeah.
what you've worked through. But I want to talk about like the power of the because. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're here to, I believe, to share with the world, is like, we're going to have the messy, right? Like me and Kristen today, if it hasn't hit the nail on the head, we is a hot ass mess sometimes. But like, you
Here, here.
still you show up anyway, right? There's moments, like you said, horizontal days. My best friend Allie calls them that too. She'll be like,
Oh, I
London,
love
you
that.
need a
Yeah.
horizontal day, where it's just like, and that's okay. And being messy is okay. And having the hard moments that things happen and you lose people that you love. And I
Mm-hmm.
know that you, in your bio, I read when I was kind of going through some of the things, you've lost people to suicide. So have I recently. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just a lot. And that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And because that happened, here's now what I get to
Yeah.
make it mean.
Huge, huge catalyst. Well, I feel like I didn't know it was called that, but written exposure therapy sounds a lot like memoir writing.
Got it.
Because you go back several times and edit it, and it's like you see these life events or pivotal life markers, and it shifts from something that either happened to you or da 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 to the because, okay, because that happened, I made this choice. And then this one led me to this choice. And then this one led me to this choice where I finally chose myself and feel freedom and liberated and all that. So it's just like an interesting like connection of the dots. And I would even say like that because of like if I'm going to plot or outline or make a timeline of a memoir or a story, a lot of times I'm going to make that timeline and it's like one moment and then I give the prompt. It's like this led to that, or because of this happened, because of this happened, and internally and externally. So it's like externally, like the what happened, the event, the who, what, when, where, why, and then internally, like the interior life, the emotional shift, and it can be big or small events that could read a book and this shifted this, or because of this happened, or it could be something more traumatic and revisit that too, and like work on the because, and like through that writing and editing process, it seems like you're getting a lot of that exposure therapy and repetition to like go into the subconscious mind and reprogram yourself. So that's interesting.
Mm,
Like that. Yeah, I'm like, now I'm like, I want to look into written exposure therapy. That's cool. I didn't
yeah,
realize. Yeah.
you'll love it. You'll love it. It's very,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's very different than talking about it. When
Mm-hmm.
you're writing it down and you keep rewriting it,
Yeah.
I notice with myself and others, it's like you have all these details and all the things, and then slowly but surely, it's like what's important to store and make meaning of. It's like now I had like 2 pages of things all over the
Mm-hmm.
place. Now I have like a paragraph, 5 or 6 sentences that just, and I'm not beating around the bush. This is exactly what happened. This is how I felt. This is,
Mm-hmm.
right where it is. Hit the bullseye. Okay, that's there. That's clear. Now I don't need to run around holding that flag, but I
Mm-hmm.
can now write what I'm going to make it mean moving forward. And that's what I want to bring to the world. And so
Yeah.
that's what I feel like I'm birthing regularly, are my
Beautiful.
becauses.
Yeah, that process sounds like a fantastic and beautiful way to help extract like the wisdom from the wounds that happen.
And then I
And like,
usually keep the becauses and I burn the stories. You don't have to burn it, but I'm very ritualistic when it comes to those
I love
things.
fire.
So
Yeah,
same. So I'm like, okay, what happened doesn't really matter. What am I going to make it mean moving forward? So I have this
exactly.
journal that has a lot of because pages and then a lot of pages ripped out because I'm like, okay, yeah, I remember what happened. That's cool. Let me burn that in
Mm-hmm.
my toilet or outside or something. And then
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's what I like to do.
Well, yeah, because to me, that's the truth of the present moment. I will say though that revisiting some of mine, it was also a permission slip to feel like some of the things that I probably suppressed in like the certain time moment, like with the grief with my dad, or I didn't feel it to the capacity. I felt it that I could then, but rewriting it gave me permission to feel right the because and release that old story and pattern. And like I think it, just like it also, I want to add one little thing about discernment for me and the messiness. It's like, okay, am I avoiding showing up because I feel messy, or discerning is like, or am I resisting showing up because I need rest? So that's, it's like, I feel like discernment and curiosity is a big key, like for me, on like this whole messiness, on showing up, on storytelling, like on helping people. Those two things are like what I keep going back to. I'm like, do I need to hibernate? Or am I resisting being seen? Like, what, just getting curious.
Yeah. What does the mess need? I'm not sure. Every
Yeah,
day it
what's
might
the
be
most
different.
nourishing? Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah, and honoring the truth of the present moment.
So good. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you, honey.
Thanks for talking to
I
me.
love where all we went.
From our periods to our mess
Yeah,
to our story to our because. And so, yeah, we both need a little heating pad horizontal moment
for
this
sure.
weekend.
That's like exactly what I'm gonna do. I just want to go lay there for a little bit, drink my water, and then reheat my heating pad.
Well, thank you guys for listening. Thank you for you, Kristen.
Thank you. Thank you for you.